Alright, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time of the year again when HOI4 gets a DLC! Ladies and gentlemen, when the Paradox developers up in their ivory tower remember they have a game. I've seen so many videos talking about it, and I just kind of want to look at it and you know, kind of see my reactions
Welcome back
to it.
to another Hearts of Iron 4 country showcase video.
What are the
I'm Peter Nicholson.
What are the captions in Chinese? Is that what language is that? Chinese simplified. Yeah, I don't speak Chinese.
Director. And today we're diving into the first part of our upcoming theatre pack,
Australia!
Thunder at Our Gates. Australia has always occupied a somewhat unique position in Hearts of Iron. It's distant from the main theatres of war, limited in manpower, and heavily tied to the British Empire. While this has historically shaped its gameplay, it's also constrained it. With this rework, the goal has been to transform Australia into a nation defined not by its limitations alone, but by how it responds to them. At its core, the update is about giving the player meaningful strategic direction. Australia is no longer simply reacting to global events, instead it is constantly weighing competing priorities. Loyalty versus independence, preparation versus opportunity, domestic growth versus external reliance. These tensions underpin nearly every system in the rework. To understand how this plays out, it makes sense to begin with the historical democratic path. Australia's democratic gameplay is built around a new system which reflects its political reality in the 1930s. Rather than committing you to a single linear path, the country now operates through two competing parties: the United Australia Party and the Australian Labour Party. Each represents a distinct approach to governance, and more importantly, each unlocks its own set of focus clusters tied to its time in power. The United Australia Party emphasises cooperation with Britain, and a continued reliance on imperial structures. Its policies tend to strengthen ties abroad and reinforce Australia's role within the Commonwealth. In contrast, the Australian Labour Party focuses on building domestic strength, encouraging industrial independence, and reducing reliance on external powers. Neither approach is strictly superior, and neither is locked behind a one-time choice. Okay. Instead, elections occur throughout the game.
Oh, I see. So
then comes the opportunity.
Kind of, wow, I think the current, what is it? Road to 56 has like a similar system when it comes to Czech, like the last video I did, the Czech Republic. It has like a very similar system, right? Where you have to like decide, you click a button and you kind of like rotate priorities. Okay, that's interesting. That's really good. It sounds really exciting, honestly.
Through campaigning and other political actions, you can shape party popularity over time, gradually unlocking additional focus clusters.
Okay.
Importantly, once a cluster has been unlocked, it remains available, regardless of future election results. This allows for a more cumulative approach to political development, where earlier decisions continue to shape later possibilities. This means that the democratic path is less about choosing a direction at the start, and more about constructing one over time. A player might initially lean into British cooperation, before pivoting towards self-sufficiency.
Yeah.
Or they may alternate between the two approaches, depending...
I think this is really good, because it gives like the player complete control, right? Because I feel like with focuses, like you get locked behind, which is kind of cringe. Just even you know, just looking at like bonuses, right? You know, sometimes, you know, maybe you're playing HOI4 just like to win, right? Which, like, sure, that's a way to play it. You know, or even if you want to, like, I guess if you want to LARP, getting locked behind a focus tree is so annoying because you have like preset decisions, right? And maybe you can like have a little discretion within those decisions, right? But like, let's say you're playing Germany, there's no way to, like, you know, play like a really unique game, you know, tailored to you, right? Tailored to what you want to do, you know, given situations, right? Maybe you commit to one thing, but you change your mind later, right? Because you figure out you want to do something else, right? I feel like this is really wonderful, because you have to like build up to big decisions, right? And you can like pivot and like adapt to certain situations.
On the strategic situation, the system is designed to support that flexibility without removing the importance of political planning.
Yeah.
Of course, stability is not guaranteed, and one of the defining moments of Australia's wartime experience is represented through the Cabinet Trust system. Triggered in the wake of the Canberra air disaster, this system introduces a crisis of confidence in the government. At this point, you must decide whether to allow the current leadership to step down or attempt to maintain control despite growing instability. Allowing the government to resign provides an opportunity to reset the political situation and unlock new focus paths, but it comes at the cost of an even greater loss of stability. Attempting to hold on the other hand, preserves continuity but will not allow for the seizing of opportunities that arises in the tumult. You can choose to engage with the system proactively or wait for it to occur historically, and that decision will often depend on your broader strategic needs. Beyond politics, one of Australia's most defining constraints is its population. Unlike many major powers, it cannot simply expand its army through increased conscription. Its manpower pool is limited, and this limitation persists throughout the game. Addressing this issue becomes a central part of the player's long-term planning.
Yeah.
The populate or perish branch provides tools to gradually...
As Australia when I tell you there's nobody there. It's like essentially a whole continent. Nobody.
alleviate this problem. Through immigration policies, welfare expansion, and changes to recruitment restrictions, you can increase both civilian population growth and available manpower. However, these changes don't come without cost. They often impact national stability, since disruptions of the status quo tend to be met with resistance. As a result, the player has to know when to see to their military needs and ensure they're supported by the right advisors and leaders in order to progress.
This is nice.
This also extends to conscription. Australia cannot simply increase its mobilisation laws at will, and must instead build the political will to do so. By completing specific focuses, you'll gradually unlock higher conscription levels, with each one raising the maximum mobilisation limit by a single step, regardless of the order in which they're taken. This emphasis on trade-offs extends into Australia's industrial design as well. The reworked industry branch presents a fundamental choice between inward and outward economic strategies. The Lang Plan represents a domestically focused approach, providing stronger early industrial growth, construction bonuses, and reduced consumer goods requirements. It's well suited to players who want to establish a solid internal foundation quickly. In contrast, the export-focused path emphasises resource extraction and global trade. While it may develop more slowly in the earlier stages, it scales significantly over time, allowing Australia to become a major supplier of key resources. With enough investment, this path can unlock extremely high levels of steel production, turning Australia into an important economic player on the global stage. When it comes to military design, Australia's identity is built around specialisation rather than scale. Given its limited manpower, it can't compete with larger nations in terms of sheer numbers. Instead, it is designed to contribute smaller, highly effective forces in key areas. This is most clearly represented through the expeditionary leader trait. Generals with this trait gain significant combat bonuses when fighting outside of core territory, but they're limited in how many divisions they can effectively command. This creates a natural constraint that encourages the player to deploy smaller, more focused forces abroad, rather than attempting to build larger armies. In practice, this means that Australia excels when supporting allies, reinforcing critical fronts, or holding strategically important positions.
Oh, wow, that has so much potential for multiplayer. Right. I really, really like that. You're super small. Like, if you go, I can see a world where if you're Australia, you would prioritize resources so you can be sort of like a piggy bank for the rest of your allies. It sounds like a boring game. Well, I guess not boring, but like I feel like like the amount of coordination you would need, right? Like if you're playing Australia, specializing single player, that does sound kind of boring. That's like maybe my one issue. Right, because I mean, then again, right? If you're playing Australia, then you either want to check out the DOC or or you're just like bored. You know what I mean?
It's not designed to dominate entire theatres on its own, but it can have a meaningful impact in specific engagements. The air and naval branches further reinforce this approach. The Air Force in particular reflects Australia's historical development into a major aerial power by the end of the war. Through production bonuses and technological improvements, you can build a highly capable air force that complements your ground operations and provides valuable support to allies. The Navy, meanwhile, emphasises rebuilding and adaptation. Starting from a reduced interwar state, the player must invest in restoring naval capacity, while making use of unique historical elements such as the coast watchers and the scrap iron flotilla. These features highlight Australia's ability to leverage limited resources effectively, turning what might otherwise be disadvantages into strengths. Moving away from the historical path, the fascist route begins from a position of weakness, represented by the struggling Australia First movement. Fascist support in Australia is minimal, and unlike the democratic path, there is no existing power base to build on. Instead, you must gradually cultivate support while operating under the constraints of an actively resistant government. This is represented through a system of political pressure and suppression. Early on, attempts to grow fascist popularity are heavily penalised, reflecting state surveillance and public opposition. Only by steadily increasing support through focuses and decisions can the player begin to overcome this resistance. Once a certain threshold is reached, these restrictions are lifted, allowing fascist popularity to grow more rapidly and opening the path toward a full political transition. As with the democratic route, the Canberra air disaster plays a central role here, but with a different outcome. Rather than acting purely as a crisis to manage, it becomes an opportunity. By leveraging the instability created through the cabinet trust system, you can trigger a no-confidence motion and use the resulting political vacuum to bring the recently established Australia First Party to power. But before then, a key strategic decision must have been taken. Who shall lead Australia First? The choice of P.R. Stevenson will lead to a more immediate
Oh my, yeah. Yeah, okay, I don't even need to say anything.
ideologically driven transformation. His path focuses on rapid independence from Britain, allowing you to reject imperial obligations and pursue an isolationist, nationalist agenda. Mechanically, this opens up diplomatic options tied to Germany, including cooperation in reclaiming former Pacific territories. It also introduces systems tied to national identity, where investing in Australian culture can reduce resistance in occupied territories and eventually allow them to be integrated more fully. This path favours early confrontation, and rewards players willing to take decisive and often aggressive action. Selecting Adela Pankhurst, by contrast, shifts the pacing of the path significantly. Instead of immediately breaking away, her route allows Australia to remain within the Commonwealth, while gradually increasing its autonomy. Through a series of focuses, you can leverage British support to expand Australia's military and regional influence, either by taking a more active role in Southeast Asia, or by contributing to conflicts elsewhere in the Empire. Independence is still the end goal, but it's delayed until Australia is in a stronger position to assert itself, whether peacefully or through direct conflict. The Communist path takes a different approach, beginning not with political elites but with grassroots movements. Trade unions and worker organisations form the foundation of this route, and the player must expand their influence across individual states. This is done through a system that allows targeted increases in communist support, but rapid expansion introduces instability, forcing you to carefully manage the pace of your growth. This tension culminates in the Dalfram dispute, which acts as the turning point for the communist takeover. From here, the focus shifts away from building support and toward reshaping the state itself, primarily through strikes and industrial reform. At the same time, anti-communist elements within the new guard begin to organise in response. If you allow instability to spiral or delay, this growing opposition can escalate into a full civil war. Strikes are initiated through decisions and act as temporary states that unlock specific political focuses. While a strike is active, you gain access to a series of reforms that can be passed by completing those focuses. Each reform delivers significant economic or structural changes, but the strike will continue until one of these reforms is successfully enacted. This creates a cyclical process, where the player must repeatedly initiate strikes in order to progress, all while managing the disruption they cause. As the path develops, this system evolves into full nationalisation. Once unlocked, nationalisation becomes an ongoing process that must remain active to access the associated focuses. While in effect, it applies substantial penalties, representing resistance from remaining capitalist structures, but also enabling a series of powerful long-term transformations. This introduces a key decision point. You can choose to fully commit, remaining within the nationalization system long enough to complete every available reform and maximize its long-term benefits. Alternatively, you can push through it more quickly, accepting fewer permanent advantages in exchange for stabilizing the nation sooner. Unlike earlier parts of the tree, these choices aren't reversible, and skipped reforms cannot be revisited. Finally, once the new regime is established, you must determine Australia's role on the global stage. Whether that means undermining the British Empire from within, aligning with existing communist powers, or pursuing an independent revolutionary path, each option reshapes the strategic landscape in new ways. Taken together...
Great. Considerable upgrade. I mean, holy freaking moly. Let's check out the Dutch East Indies. Oh, snooze fest.
The Dutch East Indies presents a very different kind of starting position. It is not a nation defined by weakness in resources or population, but by how those resources are controlled and by who. By 1936, the archipelago has been under Dutch rule for centuries. It spans thousands of islands with a vast diversity of cultures, languages, and political structures. Despite this, a shared identity has begun to emerge, shaped not by unity of origin, but by a shared experience under colonial rule. This creates a different gameplay foundation. The question is not simply how to build a nation, but how to take control of one that already exists in fragmented form. One of the defining characteristics of the East Indies is its decentralized structure. Mechanically, this is represented through non-core states that begin with high compliance and no resistance. These regions are stable but not fully integrated, and bringing them into the fold becomes an important long-term objective. Multiple branches across the focus tree provide opportunities to integrate these states over time. This allows the player to approach consolidation in different ways. Economically, the East Indies begins in a position of both strength and vulnerability. It is one of the world's largest exporters of raw materials, producing vast quantities of rubber and oil. However, the global downturn caused by the Great Depression has sharply reduced demand. This situation is represented through a national spirit that limits how many resources can be exported. Over time, this restriction can be reduced through industrial focuses, but doing so often comes at the expense of diversification. This introduces an early strategic question. Do you rebuild the export economy as it was, or begin shifting toward a more balanced industrial base? Investment decisions allow for the development of underutilized regions. In some cases, these investments contribute toward integrating princely states, while in others, they provide direct economic benefits. At a broader level, you must decide whether to align economically with Western markets or shift toward emerging Asian partners. These choices influence not only economic growth, but also diplomatic relationships, particularly with the Netherlands. To stabilize this export-driven economy, the resource contract system provides a way to mitigate volatility. By leasing resources to private companies, the player gains more predictable returns in the form of civilian factors and equipment, reducing the impact of sudden market shifts.
What is that? So
Mitigate volatility. By leasing resources to private companies, the player gains more predictable returns in the...
Okay, so you can sell your production, whatever you produce, and you lose it. And okay, so it's coded by just like upping your rubber consumption. Sure. And you get guns. Okay, so you pay. Okay, so it essentially turns your resources into cash. Okay.
Form of civilian factors and equipment, reducing the impact of sudden market shifts. The political direction of the East Indies is defined early on through the Sotarjo petition. Supporting the petition leads down the loyalist route, where autonomy is pursued within the framework of Dutch rule.
Okay.
Opposing it or rejecting the system entirely opens the door to more radical outcomes. This moment acts as a clear pivot point, separating cooperative and revolutionary playstyles. The loyalist path introduces a joint focus system shared with the Netherlands. This is split into political and military branches. On one side, the Netherlands can invest in the colony, strengthening its economy and infrastructure. On the other, the East Indies can work toward increasing autonomy by meeting the conditions set out in the Sotarjo petition. This creates a competitive dynamic. Both sides are effectively working toward their own objectives within the same framework, and the outcome is determined by which side reaches its capstone first. If the East Indies completes its objectives, it gains the ability to declare independence. However, if the Netherlands invests heavily enough, it can bind the colony closer, extract greater economic value, and prevent independence altogether. The player must consider not only their own actions, but also how the Netherlands is likely to respond. Supporting the loyalist path also unlocks the Volksstaat system. This represents the limited legislative body within the colony and provides a way to push for reforms. Through decisions, you can propose measures that increase autonomy and advance the Sotarjo petition. However, these proposals are not guaranteed to succeed. The Netherlands can veto them, returning some political power but delaying progress. This adds another layer of interaction where political advancement is not entirely under the player's control, reinforcing the constraints of colonial governance. If you choose to move away from the loyalist path, the focus shifts towards revolution. Unlike many other civil war scenarios, this is not a single event, but a multi-stage process that unfolds over time. The first stage is the underground revolution. Here, the player remains within the Dutch East Indies while preparing for independence. This involves establishing militia bases across selected states, including a central headquarters. The number and location of these bases determine the strength and shape of the revolution when it begins. Choosing where to invest becomes a strategic decision, balancing cost against long-term positioning. Once preparations are complete, you can declare independence, moving into the second stage. At this point, the republic exists but lacks recognition. States where militias hold authority fall under Indonesian control, while others remain under Dutch administration. This creates a fragmented front where territory must be gradually consolidated rather than captured through a single decisive war. To support this structure, the revolution uses an escalation system adapted from existing mechanics. Activities such as raids or territorial expansion raise the level of conflict, while diplomatic actions can reduce it. At lower levels, the conflict remains limited. As escalation increases, the Netherlands gains greater freedom to respond, eventually allowing it to declare full war with reduced international consequences. This creates a pacing mechanism. You must decide how aggressively to expand, knowing that rapid gains may accelerate a larger conflict. Given the geography of the region, naval operations also play a role. Marine commander raids provide a way to capture distant islands, but they are inherently risky. Without a strong navy, these operations rely on stealth and timing, and failure can be costly. Together, these systems encourage a measured approach to expansion, where positioning and timing matters as much as raw strength. One of the defining challenges during the revolution is manpower. Despite a large population, the central government lacks the structure to fully mobilize it. Instead, the player relies heavily on Lascar militias. These groups can be brought into the fold through focuses, providing fully equipped divisions. However, each group comes with its own demands. Failing to meet these expectations can result in penalties, adding another layer of internal management. This system reflects the fragmented nature of the revolutionary forces and reinforces the importance of political as well as military decisions. Finally, the political landscape within Indonesia is far from stable. Multiple ideologies compete for influence, and internal events regularly disrupt the balance. These events can shift support, alter stability, and introduce new characters. To stabilize the nation, the player must consolidate power under a single ideology, unlocking the corresponding political path. Each path offers a distinct direction, from centralized governance to democratic reform or further revolutionary expansion. The Dutch East Indies rework transforms the region into a deeply layered experience. It combines economic management, political decision-making, and a multi-stage conflict system into a cohesive whole. Rather than a straightforward progression, the player is navigating overlapping systems, each with its own risks and rewards. Whether pursuing autonomy, maintaining colonial ties, or leading a revolution, the outcome is shaped not by a single decision, but by how these systems are managed over time.
Okay. Thoughts. Looks fun. Probably won't play Indonesia. I mean, it sounds interesting. I'm glad they did something with it because it was already like it was pretty boring, regardless, right? But I mean, it just sounds like it just sounds boring, honestly, right? I mean, I'm sure you can play in a multitude of ways, right? But it kind of sounded like the two decisions were independence or no independence, right? Which makes sense for Indonesia historically, right? Because they didn't. I'm glad they did something, right? Right now we have 2 more videos and then we'll be done, fellas.
Welcome to another country showcase for upcoming theater pack Thunder Gates. My name is Laszlo, senior game designer for Hearts of Iron 4. Siam begins the game in a unique position. Unlike many of its neighbors, it has maintained its independence, but at the cost of territorial concessions and a delicate geopolitical balancing act between colonial powers. Internally, the country is unstable, governed by a coalition that is less a unified administration and more a collection of competing interests. This creates a central design theme for Siam. The player is not simply choosing a direction, but managing competing forces over time. Political authority is not absolute, and every decision has consequences across multiple systems. At the core of Siam's gameplay is the Kanaratsudo, the ruling political structure that emerged after the 1932 revolution. Rather than representing this as a simple ideological split, the system tracks 2 independent factions, the civilian clique and the military clique. Each clique evaluates the player's actions separately. Decisions that strengthen one side will often weaken the other, but not always in a symmetrical way. This means the player is not balancing a single axis, but managing 2 parallel relationships. Over time, these relationships become critical. If either clique becomes too dissatisfied, it will begin to escalate its response. This creates a warning window where the player can attempt to repair relations. If left unresolved, the situation will culminate in a coup attempt and potentially a civil war. This system also defines the structure of the early focus tree. From the outset, the player is presented with choices that broadly favor either civilian or military interests, but long-term success often requires engaging with both. The historical path follows Siam's descent into fascism by consolidating military power under Pibun. The player must first create the conditions for Pibun's rise, either by building sufficient ideological support or by navigating political events that weaken the existing leadership. Once in power, the system shifts towards centralization. Opposition is removed through targeted purges, reducing internal threats but also narrowing the political landscape. This simplifies some aspects of internal management, but at the cost of flexibility. The player gains access to tools focused on state control and mass mobilization. Propaganda becomes a repeatable system, allowing the player to invest political resources into ongoing bonuses. Cultural mandates reshape internal modifiers over time, reinforcing the state's ideological direction. These systems reward sustained investment. The more consistently the player engages with them, the more effective they become. However, they also demand resources that could otherwise be spent elsewhere, creating an ongoing trade-off between internal control and external expansion. A defining feature shared across multiple paths is the Pantai expansion system, which addresses one of Siam's historical motivations, the recovery of lost territories. This system introduces limited wars as a distinct mechanic. Instead of triggering immediate large-scale escalation, the player can initiate targeted conflicts with specific objectives and a defined timeframe. So what does this mean in practice? When a limited war begins, the player is given a set period to occupy designated states. If successful, the conflict ends in a negotiated settlement where those territories are retained. Failure to meet the objective does not result in total defeat, but instead imposes penalties that reflect a partial collapse without full annexation. This creates a different strategic rhythm. The player must prepare for short, focused campaigns rather than prolonged wars. Speed and planning are more important than sheer military scale. After acquiring territory, a second layer of the system becomes relevant: integration. Occupied regions must be developed and brought to sufficient compliance before they can be fully incorporated. Only then can the player unlock their full economic and manpower potential. The monarchist path introduces.
I guess okay. It sounds like a fun system. You expand slowly. There's no like big sweeping assault. I think it's fun. I think it could be fun. Right. This comes out June 11th. You'll be damned if I'm not on there immediately when it comes out. The moment it drops, I promise you, I'm there. This sounds really fun. I think it makes sense though, because obviously right to the left you have the Raj and then the Allies obviously, and then to your right you have French Indochina, I think it's called. It's like Vietnam essentially. So it makes sense. It's kind of in a place where you can't really do like sweeping advances. That does make sense. You're kind of constrained by location. I mean, like even if you look at where they're advancing, like they're marching southward, right, and they're in the UK as call it the Dominion as our enemy in the Siamese-British War, right? So it makes sense. I think this is the best way that they could have done it, because without having you fight the Allies, right?
The player can initiate targeted conflicts with specific objectives and a defined timeframe. So what does this mean in practice? When a limited war begins, the player is given a set period to occupy designated states, if successful,
it's a good idea.
Military scale. After acquiring territory, a second layer of the system.
Yeah, like they're fighting French Indochina right now, right? So I think having like short-term assaults is a really good idea, because it allows you to expand without having you fight the Allies. You know what I mean?
Becomes relevant. Integration. Occupied regions must be developed and brought to introduces a multi-stage political transformation built around legitimacy, coalition building, and eventual regime change. Rather than relying on a single decision, this path unfolds through a series of preparations. The player works to build support among different internal groups, each with its own expectations. Once sufficient support is gathered, the player initiates a high-risk political maneuver that leads to a civil war. The outcome determines the structure of the restored monarchy. After victory, the system shifts again. Leadership is no longer straightforward. This path unfolds through a series of preparations. The player works to build support among different internal groups, each with its own expectations. Once sufficient support is gathered, the player initiates a high-risk political maneuver that leads to a civil war. The outcome determines the structure of the restored monarchy.
Hopefully they expand on that. That sounds really interesting. So, so you get support from factions internally, right? And then you obviously do the civil war, right? And then so what happens in the civil war determines what the monarchy looks like.
After victory, the system shifts again. Leadership is no longer straightforward, as authority is
Regency. Okay.
divided between a young monarch, a regent, and the factions that enable the restoration. The choice of regent defines the immediate direction of the state, ranging from authoritarian control to more moderate or constitutional approaches. However,
no, it's just you kind of choose the focus. That's a goofy portrait.
is not the final stage. Over time, the young king matures, and the player gains influence over his development. Through periodic decisions, the player shapes his attributes, which in turn determine long-term bonuses and leadership style. Siam's economic position at the start of the game is limited, and its industrial tree reflects two distinct approaches to modernization. The first approach focuses on aggressive economic expansion. The player leverages foreign expertise, financial instruments, and rapid industrialization to accelerate growth. Mechanically, this path offers strong, immediate bonuses. Systems such as bonds and external cooperation provide quick gains, allowing the player to overcome early limitations. However, these benefits come with increased risk. Many of the bonuses are conditional, relying on factors such as resource availability or economic stability. If these conditions are not met, the player may face penalties or slow progress. The key decision is how much risk to accept. A well-managed economy can grow rapidly, but missteps can delay development at critical moments. The alternative path emphasizes stability and gradual growth. Instead of rapid industrialization, the player builds on Siam's existing agricultural base. This approach introduces systems designed to buffer the economy against external shocks. For example, production can be stored over time and released during wartime, creating a reserve that supports sustained conflict. While this path develops more slowly, it provides consistent output and fewer vulnerabilities. It is particularly effective in prolonged conflicts, where stability becomes more valuable than rapid expansion. In both cases, the industrial tree culminates in powerful late-game bonuses, but the path taken determines how the player reaches that point. The democratic path centers on outmaneuvering the military rather than confronting it directly. Instead of immediate conflict, the player engages in a staged political strategy. A key system here is the use of controlled escalation, where the player deliberately provokes overreaction from the military faction. This is tracked through a buildup of political tension. The more the military publicly opposes the player's actions, the greater the eventual backlash against them. When the confrontation finally occurs, the outcome depends on how effectively the player has managed this buildup. A strong position may avoid civil war entirely, while weaker preparation results in a more contested transition. After securing power, the focus shifts to consolidation and international alignment. The player must decide how to handle the remnants of the military, either through direct purges or continued oversight. Externally, the democratic path opens to multiple strategic directions. The player can align with established powers, build regional alliances, or intervene in ongoing conflicts. Naval development becomes a key component of this path, addressing the typical limitations of smaller nations. Systems are introduced to help the player establish a functional fleet despite a limited starting position. Alternatively, the player can focus on land warfare, engaging directly in regional conflicts and influencing their outcomes. A defining moment in Siam's gameplay occurs when confronted by a major power. At this point, the player must decide whether to resist or submit. Choosing to resist provides immediate defensive advantages, enabling the player to respond effectively to invasion. However, it commits the country to a potentially difficult war. Submission, on the other hand, creates a different kind of gameplay. The player becomes aligned with the invading power, gaining certain benefits while also taking on obligations. These obligations increase over time, representing the growing demand placed on the country. The longer the player remains aligned, the greater the cost. This system introduces a dynamic relationship rather than a fixed alliance. The player can choose to remain loyal or use the situation as a temporary measure before switching sides later on. The option to reverse alignment adds a strategic layer. Timing becomes more critical, as switching too early or too late can significantly affect the outcome. Siam's military tree allows the player to define their strategic doctrine.
Interesting. Loved it. Pretty much status quo, how it works basically every country. Fancily translated, you up support, you do focuses, and boom.
Based on the type of war they expect to fight. At a high level, the player chooses between different pacing models: short, decisive conflicts, prolonged wars of attrition, or a balanced approach. Each option provides bonuses tailored to its intended strategy, encouraging the player to commit to a specific style of warfare.
That's interesting. I wonder what that looks like. But being able to prepare for like a short-term war, long-term war, so I'm assuming like what short-term wars would give more equipment up front, maybe, right? Because it's just, the assumption is you spend it quickly. Like bigger army, more equipment, maybe. I guess long-term would be smaller army, but more equipment. I don't know. I'm kind of guessing, right? What makes sense?
Presents a final strategic choice: whether to invest in maritime power or redirect those resources elsewhere. A full naval investment path provides the tools needed to build and sustain a fleet, along with bonuses that also support broader industrial growth. This ensures that even players with a limited naval focus can benefit from partial investment. Alternatively, the player can choose to abandon naval ambitions entirely. This converts maritime infrastructure into civilian benefits, strengthening the domestic economy at the cost of naval capability. Siam's focus tree is built around the idea of managing constraints. Political instability, limited industry, and external pressure all shape the player's experience. Rather than offering a single dominant strategy, the tree represents a set of interconnected.
That's interesting. Good.
Welcome to the future
final one, boys.
Upcoming theater pack Thunder at our gates. My name is Laszlo, senior game designer for Hearts of Iron 4. Instead of generals functioning purely as passive army modifiers, players can now deploy them onto the map as dedicated HQ units.
Whoa.
Senior game designer for Hearts of Iron 4.
Whoa. Okay. Normally two. Whoa. We're gonna go one time.
Instead of generals functioning purely as passive army modifiers, players can now deploy them onto the map as dedicated HQ units.
Whoa.
These HQs are attached to specific battle orders, and their bonuses apply to divisions assigned to that same operation. The core idea is operational prioritization.
Whoa! Okay. This is insane. Hold on.
Divisions assigned.
Okay, so if I'm to understand this correctly, you get your general, and you can make a unit.
These HQs are attached to specific battle orders,
and you set them to a battalion.
and their bonuses apply to divisions assigned to that same operation.
I see.
The core idea is operational prioritization. If an army is split across multiple fronts, the player must decide where leadership and planning support matter most. A general assigned to one offensive may significantly strengthen that operation, while other fronts operate with fewer benefits. Deploying an HQ requires command power, equipment, and time. They are not trained like normal divisions, making them a strategic investment rather than disposable support units. Players can also customize HQs through a dedicated designer. Larger HQs provide stronger combat bonuses and are harder to destroy, but they cost more resources and take longer to deploy. Different HQ setups can specialize around offensive coordination.
So if that unit is destroyed, does your general get
environmental support,
killed?
Survivability, or other operational roles depending on your theater of war. Positioning matters as well. HQs can now automatically maintain a chosen distance behind the front line. following advances and retreats without requiring constant manual control.
That's smart.
The closer an HQ is positioned to active combat, the stronger its bonuses become. That creates a direct trade-off between effectiveness and safety. Keeping an HQ near the front line improves planning and commander abilities, but it also increases the risk of the HQ being overrun during breakthroughs or encirclements.
Yeah.
And because generals now exist physically on the map, they can also be captured. If an HQ is destroyed or isolated, the commanding officer may fall into enemy hands.
Whoa,
Players can later...
That's cool. That's honestly super cool. Oh my god. Okay, so they can get captured. Oh my god, that's super. So you can have like situations where you have like full offensives dedicated to capturing people. That's cool.
recover captured generals through military action, raids, or intelligence operations.
Oh my god. So spy. Oh my god. So you need agencies. Like you need agencies, and you need to prioritize, regardless of like if you can afford it. Focused on improving security. Or at least like catching foreign spies, because they might kidnap your general. That's actually so cool.
Ship captains introduce a naval leadership system focused on progression and specialization.
You can assign...
Individual ships can now gain captains who develop through combat experience and service history.
This is just like the promote like generals, but like for the Navy.
Ships track their participation in battles, enemy kills, assists, and other operational records across the campaign.
This is genuinely just the
Captains can earn medals that provide naval-specific bonuses, and new traits allow officers to specialize around particular ship classes and fleet roles over time. The system is designed to integrate naturally into existing naval gameplay, adding more continuity and identity to fleets without introducing heavy additional management. Thunder at Our Gates expands the role of leadership across both land and naval warfare. Together, these systems...
This is really cool. This is I think I am most excited for in this update. I think the Army HQ is the coolest thing that I've seen so far, right? Because it doesn't change combat, but it changes the priorities, right? Because now you want to invest in Army HQs and, good generals, and you want to keep them safe. And now they can get kidnapped, and now you have to prioritize security. Now you have to get all these new things get thrown in the mix. That's really cool. I think the Navy, the ship captains system, it's a sort of a, what do you call it? Sort of like a quality of life change, right? Instead of only being able to do it in the Army, now you'll be able to do it in the Navy. Why they didn't do that for the Air Force? I don't know. Because you have aces, right? You have aces. Interesting. Comes out June 11th. This DLC sounds pretty hype, I'm not gonna lie. First of all, easy. I'll be playing as Australia. First one, obviously. It seems like the coolest one. But yeah, aside from that, great DLC looks like. Pretty cool, guys. Hope you enjoyed this. A little different video. Hope you guys enjoyed it.